Hello, everyone.
Hi there, guys. This is Rita.
This is Amanda. And you're listening to I Don't Know Her, the podcast where we talk about women you've probably never heard of.
But you should have.
Today you will.
So me and Amanda were talking beforehand, and we both agree we have not had a very good day today.
No. And this isn't our normal recording day. And I feel like this happens every time we change up recording days.
Yes.
Something
Change
goes
is good.
terribly wrong.
Change is good, but it is a motherfucker.
So you first talk about your day.
I'm coming off a 9-hour shift from work. I got on at around 9:45 this morning, and I got off a little bit before 7 and scarfed down some food. Saw my kid for about 5 minutes, and then we're here.
Yes, and our dog is sick, and I had to take him to the vet again. Guys, I've made more trips to the vet in the month of January 2020 than I think I did in all of 2019 and 2018 combined.
You guys have, oh my gosh, so many. I was like, they are the house of coned animals.
Yeah, and this one is serious. He's got some kind of obstruction. They did x-rays. There's something in there. It isn't budging, and so they're hoping, after having been on an IV today and an IV in the morning and more x-rays,
Jeez.
I'm just like hearing ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching every time I list this. They're going to evaluate whether or not they're going to have to operate on him. Can I just tell you what the total amount of vet bills from this month have been?
You always can.
$1,000.
Oh, fuck. Oh.
Guess how much
No.
Abby's medical bills were that arrived on Friday afternoon?
I know the amount. It was
1,000
plus.
No, it's $1,000.
1 plus. Oh, shit.
So now, in the span of a week, we have $2,000 in medical debt.
So this episode of Ida K. Her is brought to you by champagne.
That's right.
The first ever episode where we have had a drink.
Yeah,
so.
we literally have never, ever, ever had a drink during the podcast.
So we're going to do an air clink. 1, 2, 3. Clink.
We should probably address that because I think the last time we talked about drinking, you were not drinking at all.
I wasn't. So I've been working through my issues with addiction on multiple levels. So my overeating addiction, my cutting addiction, and my alcohol and drug addiction was, I feel, based a lot in hiding a big part of myself, which was abuse that I had gone through. And so working through that with a therapist, it's on pause right now because I just got my health insurance back, getting back into therapy. We just got in contact with our therapist again, and we're about to get back in. I feel like just as soon as I admitted to myself of what had happened, I felt like a veil had been lifted in a way. Because I finally accepted it, not for other people, but for myself.
Yeah.
Because I felt like everybody was telling me of like what I should have felt. And I was denying it so hard. And once I accepted it, it was like something, like the colors had changed. And so I feel like I'm not drinking so much to hide admitting what happened as much as like just trying to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because before it was just like, I didn't want to admit.
Yeah, you were just drowning.
Yeah. Real life drowning. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think we all do in ways to cope with whatever it is. And I had the full gamut. It was food, self-abuse.
Yeah, self-harm.
Yeah.
We don't talk about self-harm very often on the podcast, but both of us have.
I cut for 11 years.
And you have trichotillomania?
Yes, I pull my hair. I don't know if anybody else out there has that tendency to like, it's almost like you can't help it. It's like, even I will try to talk myself down, or I'll put something in my hand to play with, like a piece of string or a rubber band on my wrist. I've tried puzzles, but I will just continue to pull my hair. And actually, so I'm one of 6. My father and all 6 siblings, we all pull.
Yeah, that seems like I would love to find out if there's been any research done on hereditary traits like that. Is that, like, I don't know if trichotillomania has a genetic component, but
I'm
it
wondering
sounds
if
like
it's
it for
like
your family.
a learned behavior, I almost feel.
I actually did that too for a while. I did it during the time when I had told my mother about my stepfather sexually abusing me, and she took me to Oklahoma so that she could like get everything ready, like divorce him, do all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then while I was there, decided I was lying, and I knew that she hadn't told me yet, but I could just sense it when we would speak on the phone. And I just started pulling my hair out of one spot, and for years in my teens and early 20s, I just had a giant bald spot. I didn't think it would ever grow back because I thought, because when I finally did stop, there was this just very tender pink scar.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how like hair doesn't grow out of scars?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm never going to have hair there again. Miraculously, it did eventually
What
come
do you
back.
feel helped you stop that kind of behavior?
Therapy,
Okay.
100%. Dealing with the sexual abuse and not having to be quiet. I mean, leaving my family's house at the age of 18 was much improvement.
Getting pulled out of that atmosphere. Yeah.
It's impossible to heal when you have to constantly be reminded every day of what you've experienced. I admire anybody who can grow and do that work and still have to be in that abusive place.
Mm. I thought I was being like actually really clever with my pulling, but Amanda was like, I see you do that all the time. Your hair's all over our house. And I was like, oh shit. I was like,
I did not say your hair was all over the house. You said that, and I joked that it was, but it really isn't.
Well, it like really ends up in a lot of places. Like everybody's like, your hair is always like, it's at work and it's at home. And I thought I was being really subtle with it. And like actually my coworkers have actually noticed too. My husband grabs my hand and he pulls it down and just says, hold my hand so that I don't pull. And I'll even like it'll be a minute and I'll be like, I'm not going to pull. And then my hand's up there again. It's like, I almost feel like I have to wear gloves or something.
So you don't notice when you're doing it?
I don't notice till I'm about 3 minutes into it.
Yeah, every time we get together before we podcast, when we're sitting on the couch, just chatting, you'll reach up and you'll do it the entire time we talk.
It's hard.
It's so hard.
It's been one of my, because I stopped cutting. I mean, I stopped cutting I started at 11. I stopped at 22 when I had my son because the doctor noticed I had cuts all over my thighs. And he was like, do you need some help for that? Because I can get you help. And I was like, no, I'm working on it. And he's like, okay, just if you come in here again and I see that, I have to report it. And that really scared me because that to me meant they're going to take my baby.
They're going to take your baby.
Yeah. So I stopped, and my husband too was not a fan of that. So I really tried for the people around me, but not for myself.
Yes, there's a big difference. And really the only time, because you're just going to replace that behavior with another one.
Yeah. Which is for me, either it's food, which is binging and purging, or the hair pulling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or potentially
yeah,
other substances.
Definitely.
Well, that's a heavy topic this morning.
I know. But one thing too that I've never been afraid of is sharing with people that I have these disorders, and I talk openly about them. A lot of people, I would say like 60-40. 60 are very much like they get quiet and they kind of walk away. They don't want to hear about that you're just being open that you have these issues. And 40 are like, yeah, I've dealt with something similar, but it's this, and engage in the conversation. And I feel like there's a freedom in that for me of being able to say, yeah, I have these disorders and I've had these and I struggle with them.
Yeah.
Because I hid them for so long, and hiding them is even worse.
Yeah, I agree. I've been open about my past as a sexual abuse survivor for a long time. Because for a long time, it was just me constantly trying to deal with it. And now I can talk about it and it doesn't feel present. It's not at the surface all the time, which is a huge relief. It just really does ease a burden. And this last weekend, I was one of the speakers at the Women's March, and I talked about it. And I thought about not talking about it during my speech because I was afraid it would be triggering to other people in the crowd.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do anything that would make people uncomfortable. But it was important to me that we talk about that almost all of us in that crowd have probably at some point been abused sexually or physically or assaulted, and we're still here.
Yeah, I was actually really shocked in a good way that you brought that up in your speech. And I was actually very proud of you that you did that as well, because that is not easy to say, especially in front of how many people were there. But I feel like it was very important because when you were talking, I was looking at people and these women were nodding their heads.
Yeah.
Because they have been there. It was amazing.
Too many of us have been here, but thank you.
But it was like, we have to know that it's okay to say that. We have to say, okay, I did have a bad day and my fucking life is not good right now. I have disorders. Yes. I have been through something that is uncomfortable to talk about. Yes. Because for too long, we've been too quiet.
Remember what Margaret McFarlane talked about?
Remind me.
She said, anything human is mentionable, and anything mentionable is
human.
No, manageable.
Yes.
So, and we had talked about how, like, if you talk about something in the open, it just gets easier to deal with. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put that into the speech, because I thought I could talk about a lot of other things. They wanted me to talk about losing my job in Montana. And I was like, you know, the problem with that is that 5 years ago, sure. 10 years ago, sure. Because it would have felt so present.
Yeah.
But now, that happened in 2009. It's 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So people, it doesn't feel as recent. They're like, oh, but that was over a decade ago. You know, even though it is still legal in the state of Montana today, January 2020, to fire somebody for being gay.
But it's like, what is the present? What's at the top of the barrel? Like,
yeah, I just felt like my story of leaving Montana because of that would be like, oh, ho hum, kind of. So I decided, you know what? I want to talk about something that just always feels present tense. Always. No matter how old you get, no matter how many years have passed.
Be in the present.
The experience of being sexually abused or assaulted always feels today. It never goes away.
No.
But it becomes manageable.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret McFarland.
Full circle in that. I love it.
I think you're first today. Do you not want to be first today?
I'm going to do it because I'm a trooper. I'm very excited about this person today because I feel like you're not even going to know who this is. I'm so excited. Because every day I come with, like, every time we record, I have this fear. I'm like, she's going to know. She's going to know. And I feel like this one, I'm like, no.
No way. Okay.
No.
Hit me with your best shot.
Gauntlet thrown. Okay. Yukiko Sugihara.
I know a Sugihara, but it was a man.
She helped save the lives of over 6,000 Jews during the Holocaust.
That's a man.
Wait.
Senpo Sugihara. What? Well, so I know Senpo Sugihara. So we'll see.
So Yukiko was born in Japan in 1913. So I'm going to preface this a little bit. I could not find anything about her, of course, before this event that I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
Her story starts, like many of their stories start, when she got married. So she met and married her husband, Shion Sugihara in 1936. Before they met, Shion had been a second lieutenant in the Imperial Army. He studied and passed the Foreign Ministry's language exams, and he learned Russian and German. After the two married, they had 3 sons consecutively, like baby, baby, baby.
Yikes.
I know, but it's kind of how things were back then.
It didn't have to be that way.
It didn't have to be that way. In 1939, Shion and Yukiko moved to Lithuania, where Shion was appointed a translator and a Japanese diplomat. He was to report Soviet and German troop movements and to find out if Germany planned an attack on the Soviets. And if so, he had to report all the details to his superiors to Berlin and to Tokyo. Yukiko was a quiet, supportive wife. She tended their home, and she ended up learning and studying German herself. So she was fluent in German as well, which that I always feel is an immense achievement. If you are multilingual, cheers to you. So one day in 1939, Yukiko looked outside the consulate and saw a crowd of Polish Jews that had lined up in front of their house. She was confused why they were there and why there were so many people, and she asked her husband what they were there for. They had come to apply for visas, he had said. The Nazis had invaded Poland and were rounding up Jews, but the Jews couldn't leave because no countries would accept them, and because they were Jewish, which is so fucking racist, and because they didn't have enough money for the expensive visas that were needed. So Shion told Yukiko that he did know of a loophole around the situation. Japan was willing to accept anyone who had a transit visa. One major problem was it was very expensive and it was almost impossible to come by. He, however, had the power to request authorization for those visas. Her husband felt like he was super conflicted with this because he's trying to be a diplomat. He's trying to play those political lines. He didn't even know if he should even ask. Well,
it was also super dangerous.
Yeah, there's a war going on.
I mean, yes, it was very, very dangerous.
So Yukiko talked to her husband for days, telling him that he had to do something. She described the faces that she saw in a memoir that she wrote titled Visas for Life. And this is an excerpt from that memoir from Yukiko. They had risked their lives in order to reach this place, their bodies exhausted, their clothes torn, and their faces tired. I would see them from my window. When they saw me looking at them, they put their hands together as if praying and said, "Please." It was so hard for me to watch these scenes. They were so miserable. 2 days passed, and my husband sent another telegram, and then a third. The answer was the same, no matter how many telegrams. Do not issue the visas. We did not know what to do. My younger sister and my children also saw these people outside the window, standing from morning till night. My eldest son, Hiroki, asked who these people were, why they were there, and it was hard for me to explain since he was a child. And I said bad people had threatened them. They had escaped, and they came to father asking for help. My son said, "They are so miserable, we must help them." My sister said the same. We all thought the same. So Yukiko said that they racked their brains for hours, day and night, trying to figure out what to do, how to help these people, and how they could get visas for these people who were literally running for their lives. They had nowhere to go. Yukiko and Shion felt that the government was just dead wrong. They didn't agree with this, and that these Jews needed help. With Yukiko's full support, Shion decided to risk his life, to risk her life, to risk her sister's life and their children. And he broke his orders, and he decided to issue the visas anyway. Yukiko said it was a frightening decision, and she worried if they were going to get caught against foreign office instructions, that her husband would for sure lose his job, and even worse, that they were in danger of being caught by the Nazis. For the next few days, Yukiko stayed up with her husband night after night, handwriting these visas.
Yes.
They had to be handwritten and all approved with his signature to be valid. They were writing 300 visas a day. the same amount of visas that were issued for a month.
Can you imagine?
No, handwriting.
Mm.
Yukiko said their hands would begin to cramp, but they kept continuing. It had to be done quickly before anybody could recognize what they were doing. The Japanese government did catch wind of what they were doing and sent communication requesting for them to stop immediately, or they were at risk for extreme punishment. They continued anyway. Shion's arms would cramp up, and Yukiko would take his arms and massage them out for him, and she would tell him more. We just need more. Keep going. We need to get these visas out. They were passing out the visas so fast that Yukiko remembers some people just waving goodbye and saying, thank you. We'll always remember you, and going to the train station. By the time they were stopped by Japanese officials, they had issued 3,500 illegal, in quotations, visas, allowing Jews to escape from the Nazis. They made most of these illegal visas upon Yukiko's advice as family visas. So it would go to the head of the family and they could get multiple people out at the same time.
I recall that now.
Which is brilliant because get them all out on one visa. So the family was packed up and they were told that they were going back to Japan. Even while they were waiting to be transported, Shion and Yukiko were writing visas and throwing them out the window so that people could pick them up and finish filling them out. As soon as they were deported, their entire family was put in jail for almost 2 years. The children, her, and himself included.
See, I never knew what happened to them afterwards, and I tried to figure that out once. I remember because I personally, this story always has really stuck with me. I didn't know his wife had anything to do with it. I only knew about him.
He was very much, the information for her was really hard to find because he was...
Yeah, he was the diplomat.
Diplomat.
He was the one in charge.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered, of all of the stories, of all the Holocaust stories that have been told, this one would make not only for a great movie in terms of its subject matter, but that scene of them tossing the visas out the window to running Jews next to the train, that scene would be so heartbreaking and powerful. And I've always been like, okay, but then what? What happens after that? I want to, and I've just never been able to figure out what happened to Sugihara after he did that.
So too, for me, the fact that they were, like you said, pushing them out the window, it was how intimate that is of wanting to save these people's lives. And one thing that Yukiko said was she was staring these people in the face, which I feel is not happening today. We're looking at people in the eye. We're looking at kids in cages and figuring out excuses rather than how to find a solution of how to help these people. And she felt in her heart, and her husband too, and her sister, how do we help these people? And there's such a lack of that nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, and not just to help people, but put your own safety and family at risk in order to do so. That requires an amount of integrity that I think few people have.
They had 3 young kids at this time too.
So the whole family gets put in jail when they get back to...
All of them.
When they're back in Japan, or when they're in Lithuania?
In Japan.
Okay, so they go back to Japan and they get all put in prison.
Her sister, him, her, and their children.
Are in jail.
And for almost 2 years.
Holy shit.
So Shion, obviously, he lost his position in the government. And when the whole family was released, they struggled to make a basic living for years. And shortly after they were all released, they suffered a tragedy. Their youngest son, Haruki, he died at the age of 7 from influenza. So I'm imagining that they did not take care of them very well. It actually said that the conditions they were held in were horrid.
Well, I mean, he's in trouble, right? He defied imperialist Japan rule.
So they lost a child due to that.
Sad.
So while living back in Japan, the couple kept what happened to themselves.
Yeah.
They feared retribution from the Nazis, harsher legal repercussions, and harm to their remaining children that were still alive. They just faded into the background until Yeshua Nishiri, who was a survivor, sought out and found them to thank them and recognized them as the heroes that they were. Yeshua had been a teenager in Poland and was saved by the Sugihara's visas and was then an employee at the Israeli embassy in Tokyo. They soon learned that an estimated 6,000 Jews were saved due to the illegal visas that they had issued. And today, those descendants today equal 40,000, all of whom owe their lives to the Sugiharas.
Mm.
Still, their neighbors and their friends did not even know what they had done until October 10th in 1984. Their story was told, and the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in Israel awarded Shiun Sugihara the title of Righteous Among the Nations. He died 1 year later after that recognition. Not willing to let their story be untold, Yukiko wrote a full memoir titled Visas for Life in 1995. She described the entire ordeal, and if she had to do it again, that she would. In 1998, she traveled to Jerusalem to visit and was tearfully reunited with survivors. Many of them held up their yellowed and broken visas with her husband's signature on them.
Oh my God.
That part, when I read it, I cried that they met her and they still had the tiny pieces of paper that saved their lives and their family and their children.
I have taught Sugihara's story, and whenever we've done the Holocaust, when I taught 8th grade, we always end with heroes. So that we don't end on like the worst parts of the Holocaust, that there were good people still. And whenever I tell his story, I always get really choked up about the fact that no one in Japan even fucking knew that he had done this, that he was just like living in poverty. His family was barely getting by.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden these people come through and they're like, we want to honor you. And then suddenly the entire country of Japan is like, oh shit.
He did something good.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't even alive long enough to be able to bask in the glory of that. Not that he was the kind of person who would bask in glory. He's kind of more of a...
But to be recognized.
But to be like, I did a good thing, and maybe now I don't have to like worry or be scared that I did this good thing.
Mm-hmm. I think she was able to be there for him to do that.
I had no idea that she wrote a book about it. I didn't know any of that. And that she was the one who went to Israel later.
She was very much a quiet player. And there was Masha Leon. He was one of the survivors and wrote an article about her. And he said that he asked her, can I just give you a hug and tell you you're beautiful? He actually told her son, who translated for him to his mother, and she wouldn't do it. Because she just felt very awkward and very humbled and very just, we don't do that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, which was crazy. I think he did finally get a hug out of her, but it's just this quiet warrior.
And to have saved that many people, I mean, it's worth the hours that you spent writing.
Yep. Oh, there's also a park in Jerusalem that the people have dedicated to Shiun. Named, what is it? The Visas for Life, Visas for 6,000 Lives. Mm. And there's excerpts from the Talmud on there as well. And I think they planted also 200 to 300 trees in his honor, which also is an honor for her as well. She spent the last 20 years of her life telling the story and the life-saving visas. She died on October 8th in 2008 in Fujisawa, Japan. Her ashes were buried at Kamakura with Shiun and their sons, Hiroki and Haruki. She has one son and one grandson of hers that have traveled and lived in Israel for a time. Both have learned and now speak fluent Hebrew.
Oh my gosh, that is really cool.
Isn't that beautiful? Just the cross.
That cross-cultural?
Yes.
Oh, that's really neat.
The house where they resided in Lithuania is now a museum and center dedicated to Yukiko and Shiun, and the street that it rests on is called the Sugihara Street. I got my information from facinghistory.org, titled Why My Husband Helped the Jews by Yukiko Sugihara, myhero.com, forward.com, an article titled Remembering Yukiko Sugihara by Masha Leon, who is one of the survivors that she helped save. The GTA.org, which is the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, a New York Times article by David Wolpe, and Wikipedia. So it seemed like you had some...
I knew everything about Sheehan, but I didn't even know he had a wife. And I didn't know her name.
Really?
And I had no idea she helped him. Like, I literally have been teaching Sugihara's story, but never even knew she existed.
That's awesome.
That's how crazy it is how much women can be erased.
Well, how much they can also be a, what do you call it, a backseat player.
Mm-hmm.
Because and
like, I didn't even consider that there was somebody helping him.
Like in our relationships with our spouses, my husband writes music. My husband performs a lot. He designs a lot. And I'll come up and be like, he'll be pissed about a design. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, it's too busy. And I was like, well, go in and erase these lines, make that more of a plain background, bring this up front, and maybe change this font and just see how it looks. And he's like, oh, yeah, that looks really good. And I'm like, awesome, I helped you. And like the design looks great. And people are like, oh, you did such a good job. And I'm like, well, I helped with that. But I'm not looking for any credit, but it's also, we're there. We're present. Mm-hmm. We have a voice. And it's not like that Shion's not up at the middle of the night and she's not up as well, fretting and thinking, how can we help these people? You know that they talked.
Oh, of course. And especially knowing now that he was married and had children, his risk was, 1, even greater, and 2, had to have been endorsed by her in order for him to do it.
Yeah.
There's just no way that that would have happened if she hadn't been on board.
She easily could have been that wife that was like, your kids don't need this. Yeah. I don't need this. Let's need do to be our safe. Jobs. Put your head down and work.
Mm-hmm. But she didn't.
She didn't do that.
That's brave.
And now there's a lineage, which is beautiful.
It is very brave and courageous, and I'm glad she did it.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
So who do you have today?
I have Gertrude Jeannette.
Oh, I don't know her.
I didn't either.
2 first names. Nope.
She is the first woman to obtain a New York City taxicab license and a Broadway actress, playwright, director, and producer.
Okay. She sounds like fun.
Yeah, she really is. Gertrude Hadley was born on November 28th, 1914. Wasn't yours in 1913?
Yes.
Weird.
I know.
She was born on November 28th, 1914 in Urbana, Arkansas. I almost said Arkansas. That is not the way it's pronounced, and I am very aware of it. Born in Urbana, Arkansas, to parents Sally Gertrude Crawford Hadley, all 4 names.
Sally Gertrude
Crawford Hadley.
Wow.
And her father, Willis Lawrence Hadley. She had 5 brothers and 1 sister.
My goodness.
So there were a total of 7 of them. And the family lived on a farm and up until the Great Depression. And at that time, her mom was when they were still living on the farm, her mom was a homemaker, taking care of 7 children.
Jeez.
And her father was a teacher on a reservation near Spiro, Oklahoma. But during the Great Depression, their family moved. Everything dried up, Dust Bowl, shit like that.
Gosh.
And their family moved to the city of Little Rock, where Gertrude attended Dunbar High School, which was, obviously, Arkansas was segregated.
Mm-hmm.
So Dunbar was an all-black high school. And she recalled once that every day they began the day by singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. Like the whole school would sing the song to start the day.
That would be a great way to start the day.
Yeah, wouldn't it? When I taught middle school, we had a bell song in the morning and the afternoon. So you would start the day with a song instead of bells, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Gertrude was set to attend Fisk University, a historically black college, after she graduated high school. But a few months before, while attending her high school prom, she met a man named Joe Jeannette II.
Joe Jeannette.
Yeah, his last name was Jeannette, which I thought was kind of interesting because it is like a first name.
Yeah.
So Joe was a prize fighter in town from New York City, and he was 35 years her senior.
Ooh, no.
Did you catch where they met?
Where?
Her prom.
The hell's that guy doing?
That was the first question I had, and I kept looking for someone else to address that at some point, but no one did. I was like, why was a prize fighter 35 years older than high school students at high school prom?
At a high school prom, we know why.
Well, it's gross.
It is gross.
So in any case, that's where they met. As the two of them danced the Lindy Hop, which was a dance that had been made popular in Harlem, he asked her to marry him. Oh, it's okay. This is her response.
Sorry, my eyes just bugged. That's why Amanda paused for a moment, because I was like, what?
So she said to him, just because I'm a small town girl doesn't mean I'm a fool.
Ooh.
And she walked off the floor.
Yeah.
But eventually he had wormed his way into her heart, and the two ended up eloping to Hot Springs, Arkansas, where they married in 1933. Then they moved to St. Louis before finally settling down in New York City. Now, Gertrude's father was understandably pissed.
Hells yeah.
He threatened to come after Joe with a shotgun.
My grandpa actually did that to my father.
Oh, okay. Care to share?
My parents are actually the same age. They're 3 months apart.
Yeah, your dad's not 35. I mean, that's weird.
My grandpa is Mexican, though, so there's that. His daughter was dating when she shouldn't have been dating.
I see.
And my dad came to bring her a box of Valentine's chocolates. And my grandpa drove his truck up an alley and pulled a shotgun in my dad's face and was like, I will kill you if you talk to my daughter again. And my mom was like, I love him. Don't shoot him.
Well, yeah, that's some toxic masculinity right there.
Yep.
So he decided, actually, like, I'm not going to do this. Gertrude has to be an adult at some point, and she's made her bed. She can lie in it.
Yep.
So he decided he's going to let her make her own decisions, even if he thought those decisions were mistakes. So Joe ended up moving the two of them to Harlem, which was known at the time. This is 1933.
Okay.
So it's the tail end of the Harlem Renaissance, which was this moment in the 20s and 30s where there was this great burgeoning arts movement in Harlem of all Black artists, writers, poets, playwrights, fine artists, all kinds of things. And that meant that would probably be a good place for her to go. But when Gertrude got there, she was immediately shocked because she called it the most segregated place I knew.
Really?
And I was like, you're from Arkansas. Like, what? But apparently, like, I think it just wasn't as present as it was when she went to Harlem.
Yeah. Maybe not as stark in your face. Not that underlying.
Yeah, she said that, like, she wasn't allowed to sit at the Woolworths lunch counter or go into restaurants, or if she wanted to go to the Lowe's Theater, she still had to sit in the balcony like they did in the South. And she was like, seriously? That's how it is here? Wow. I thought the North was supposed to be so educated. So the only place that she and Joe felt comfortable was a place called the Savoy, which was an all-Black nightclub where people gathered to drink and dance and have fun. Besides being a prize fighter, Joe was also a big fan of motorcycles. And he was the president of the Harlem Dusters, which was a motorcycle club. And tired of just riding on the back of a bike, Gertrude was like, hey, will you teach me how to ride? And he was excited to teach her. So he took her to these, they're now demolished, but these elevated train tracks in Harlem. And he taught her how to ride motorcycle without ever starting it. You know, like he would push her.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. And she ended up getting her license in 1935, which made her the first woman in New York City licensed to drive a motorcycle.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
And that same year, she gave birth to her son, Robert. Unfortunately, Robert died just 5 years later. I didn't find any cause of death. I don't know why, but
Illness, maybe, or obviously something went
yeah,
wrong.
something. He was her only child,
Hmm.
so she never did have another child. Gertrude's father was still very disappointed in her path that she's on. And he was really mostly disappointed that she hadn't gone on to further her education. Because that's like the one thing he wanted her to do. He wanted her to go to university after high school. So at the insistence of her father and also Joe, because Joe was like, I don't want your father to hate me for the rest of my life.
Good on Joe.
At the insistence of both of them, she enrolled in a WPA school. And I had to look that up.
Yeah, I was like WPA. So
It was the Works Progress Administration, which was a part of the New Deal.
oh, really?
To get people educated and filling the empty jobs. So she was taking classes in the basement of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. So she started taking these bookkeeping classes, and this was the same church basement where the American Negro Theater practiced. And one day, Gertrude met Frederick O'Neill, and he was one of the theater's founders. He noticed that she had a speech impediment. She actually had quite a stammer. She would constantly, and kind of get like stuck
stutter.
on a.
Yeah.
And so she had the speech impediment. He noticed it, and he said, "Hey, you should come to our theater because we have speech therapy. It's part of the things that we do with our actors." But in order to attend the therapy part, she had to enroll in acting classes. And in order to pay for acting classes and speech therapy lessons, she needed money.
Obviously. Yeah.
It's 1942. World War II is in full swing, which meant that many men were gone, off and fighting in the war. And that was, as we've mentioned many a time before on some of our other women, this opened up all of these opportunities for women to work in jobs that had previously been closed to them. Factories, construction, stuff like that. So Gertrude saw an opportunity when there was an ad placed in the newspaper looking for cab drivers.
Oh, awesome.
She'd learned to drive on the farm at age 13.
Yeah.
So she was like, I know how to drive. What could be so hard about this job? So she was like, okay, I know that in order for me to be a cab driver, I need to know the city backwards and forwards. So she spent days studying the maps, knowing all the roads and the routes and what's the fastest here and what times is traffic most congested. And so without telling Joe, Gertrude decided that she was going to take this cab driving test and see if she could be a taxi driver. And here's what she said of the day. 32 of us, took the test and only 2 of us passed.
Jeez.
But the other girl didn't get her license because she had citations on her driver's license. And so I was the first. That's right. Gertrude Jeannette became the first woman to get a license to drive a cab in New York City. Her husband found out by reading it in the newspaper.
Oh, shit. Could you imagine that?
Oh, can you imagine? You'd be so pissed.
You'd
You'd be like, what?
Oh my God, that's me, baby. I got a new job. Sorry, I didn't tell you.
On her first day as a cab driver,
Oh my God.
she got into an accident.
Oh, shit.
On purpose.
On purpose?
Oh, yeah. This is my mother territory. I literally am going to tell you a story after this about my mom doing almost the same thing.
Okay.
She pulled up in front of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Manhattan. And this was like during that time, and they still kind of do this. Like if you go to the airport in New York, there'll be cabs lined up, right?
Okay.
And then like one after the other will pick people up and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
So she's in the line to pull up to the front. And right when she's about to be at the front of the hotel, this jackass green cab pulls up right in front of her. Cuts her off and takes her spot. She doesn't take kindly to that.
I wouldn't either.
Angry at the slight, she rammed her fender under his and then swung it to the right and ripped it off the car.
Whoa.
And the driver in the other car got out and was like yelling at her. And then she yelled back at him, telling him, "You cut me off." And when the man realized that she was a woman driving the car, he started shouting, "A woman driver! A woman driver!"
How can this be?
I love this like repetition of the phrase "a woman driver."
Because his brain is fritzing so hard he can't like fathom what he's seeing.
My mom did something almost exactly like that. She got pinned in by two vehicles, so she just rammed them front and backwards until she could get out.
Oh my God.
I did it once too.
No, you did not.
I did. When I was in college, I lived really close. The first year I lived off campus. I lived one house off campus. Like, you walked out of my house and across the street and you were on campus.
You told me about this because I visited your campus, didn't I?
No, I don't think so.
It was another one. Anyway, continue.
But we had this house and people would constantly park in our parking spots that were for our house because they didn't want to pay for campus parking.
Yeah.
And if it was in front of the house, that was annoying, but not the worst. What was really hard is our back alleyway. So there were 3 spots in the back of the house. And we lived really like right next door to this little restaurant called the Pickle Barrel. It was very popular. It's a sandwich restaurant. And so people would come to get their lunches or whatever. So I was needing to go somewhere. I get out and I get into my car and I go to back out and there is a truck parked parallel in the alley. Like if you were trying to drive down the alley, you couldn't because his truck was just sitting there. And I couldn't get out of the back of my house because his truck was sitting there.
Yeah.
And I needed to be somewhere. So I just started pushing his truck and he came out while I was doing it. He was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And the look in his face was sheer terror.
A woman driver. A woman driver.
That's right. A woman driver.
I'm going to yell that now every time we're in a car.
Just yell it at other random women too. Just see how they respond.
New bumper sticker.
Well, needless to say, the company she worked for wasn't very pleased that their first woman driver got into an accident on their first day of work.
Well, no, because that's not her vehicle, right?
No, it's the cab they owned by the cab company.
Oh, fuck.
But she was allowed to continue driving, so that's good. And she used the money from her cab driving to pay for her bookkeeping and acting classes at the church. So the American Negro Theater was quite spectacular at the time. These names I know pretty well. I'm hoping you probably know them too, but maybe not because it's old Hollywood-ish.
Yeah.
But she studied alongside the likes of Sidney Poitier.
I know that one.
Harry Belafonte.
I know that one.
Ruby Dee.
Yes.
And Ossie Davis.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So she's like with the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
And the same talent that she had for memorizing those New York City maps came in handy because then she started to be able to memorize scripts.
Oh, okay.
And of course, memorizing the scripts helped her not have her stammer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gertrude, though, did not ever intend on being on stage. She was just taking these classes so she could do the speech therapy. But that's not how things ended up going down. So I want to share her talking about how it was that she became an actress.
Okay.
I didn't ever believe that I could walk on the stage and be an actress. I was an apprentice, and to pay for my lessons, I would be the dresser of one of the stars like Ethel Barrymore. Then there was a play being auditioned called Lost in the Stars. It was a musical. And a friend of mine insisted that I audition for it. Well, I auditioned to please him. I knew I wouldn't get the role. So I auditioned, and so I got the mother role. And that was my first play on Broadway in 1949. And so I've been working professionally off and on ever since.
So you can see that she just sort of fell into acting. That wasn't her plan.
Yeah.
So she said that every time she was on stage, she shook. And she would pray to God that he would get her out of this situation.
Oh my God.
But despite her nerves, Gertrude kept auditioning, and every time she auditioned, she got the part.
Wow.
I know. She was very talented. Somebody said she was very dynamic on stage.
Other people saw in her what she didn't see in herself.
Mm-hmm. Outside of driving and acting, Gertrude and her husband were also becoming pretty active in politics and civil rights. In 1949, the two of them decided to travel to Cortlandt Manor in Westchester County, New York, for a civil rights benefit concert. Joe was asked to serve as one of singer Paul Robeson's bodyguards. Robeson at the time was very well known for his pro-union stances, his civil rights activism, his anti-colonialism, and his affiliations with communists. So, to put it mildly, he was controversial.
Yes.
So that would be why he needed these bodyguards. People were getting pretty pissed about the things he said. And I actually, because I was like, I wanted to have some context for what happens next. I ended up reading a little bit about him. And one of the reasons why people were really upset in the United States about him is because he was in Africa. I don't know if he was in South Africa. I can't remember what it said, but he had given a speech, and the translation that made it into American newspapers was not what he actually said.
Oh.
And what was put into American newspapers was much more inflammatory and like directly comparing the United States to Hitler's Germany and shit.
That sounds like somebody had an agenda.
Oh, for sure. And nobody fact checked it. They just accepted that that's what had been said.
Yeah.
So people were fired up and fucking hated him.
Okay.
So when they arrived outside of Peekskill on their motorcycles, Joe and Gertrude and the rest of the Harlem Dusters came for what they thought would be a rousing protest concert. What they found instead was a Ku Klux Klan rally.
Oh, shit.
Yes. For Gertrude, it was the first time she'd ever seen the KKK.
Oh my God, that must have been terrifying.
And again, she grew up in Arkansas.
I know, but you don't know.
I know. I mean, all of the things that she's experiencing and witnessing that are truly horrific have happened in New York, which is, I think the whole reason this story gets told is because she wants to point out that people often have this blanket brush about the South. And part of that is to deny that there was those same problems in the North.
And still now.
Yeah, exactly.
In existence everywhere. Yes.
So they had one goal in mind. The KKK had one goal, and they were there to lynch Paul Robeson.
Oh, jeez.
So the Klan were burning crosses on the field, and they were also joined by the American Legion, who were pissed about his communist comments. And the concert goers and the KKK and the American Legion started fucking fighting.
Jeez.
But the KKK was after Paul. And this became known as the Peekskill riots, but I think it shouldn't have been called riots, really. It's an attack. It's a coordinated attack. They knew that they were coming and they wanted to attack them.
Riots is a word to take down what it really is.
It really is. So Gertrude and Joe managed to rush Paul to their motorcycles, and they took off down the road, headed back for New York City. And they ended up saving him. And he went on to become very active and famous in activism and things like that. So that same year that this stuff is happening, the American Negro Theater closes. And many of the actors wanted to stay in acting, so they all moved to Hollywood to continue their careers.
Okay.
And Gertrude very well could have too. She was their equal. She was Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier's equals. And she decided to stay.
Really?
In 1950, she decided to start up her own theater company. And there was a space in the Elks building where they had been using it as practice. And so she started her first theater there called the Elks Community Theater. That same year, she also wrote her first play. Gertrude felt compelled to create her own work after seeing what she thought was a lack of authentic Black characters and stories on stage. This is what she said. I saw parts that I knew I wouldn't play. So I started writing about women and strong women that I knew no one would be ashamed to play.
I like that.
Her first play was called This Way Forward, and it was semi-autobiographical about her upbringing in Arkansas. And she wrote, starred, directed, and produced the play in her own theater company.
My God.
Like, she was boss.
Yeah.
Gertrude also appeared on television for the first time that year. She joined Frederick O'Neill, one of the guys who founded the American Negro Theater. She joined him on the CBS General Electric Hour, which was like a variety hour. For a brief time in the 1950s, Gertrude ended up blacklisted.
Oh, really?
Because of her affiliations with Paul Robeson.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that happened. I mean,
during what was called the Red Scare.
Yeah, exactly.
She actually got pulled in front of the HUAC committee, the American House Un-American Activities.
Really?
Yeah.
And interrogated? Fuck.
She would go on to star on Broadway in Nobody Loves an Albatross, Amen Corner, The Great White Hope, and eventually became friends with Tennessee Williams, who cast her to play Nursey in Vieux Carré. And Williams actually had sought her out to help infuse the play and her character with a more authentic Black voice. Her husband died in 1956 at the age of 77, but despite her grief, she continued on. In the 1970s, she picked up some notable film roles, including appearing in Cotton Comes to Harlem, Black Girl, and Shaft.
Really?
Yeah. In 1979, she founded another theater company. And it was pretty common for theater companies to be named after the people who started them. Think like the Laura Keene Theater. But Gertrude didn't like that at all. She was like, I'm not here for me. I'm here for the community. That's the reason I want to do this. I want there to be more options for people like us.
That's so humble.
So somebody had said, why don't you call it this? Why don't you and like all of them were variations of her name. And she was like, I'm not doing that. It's not about me. So then a friend said, what about this? The Harlem Artists Development League, especially for you. The acronym spelled Hadley. Hadley.
Hadley?
Gertrude's maiden name.
I like it.
And so the Hadley Players was born. And I just want to share what she has to say about the Hadley Players.
Sure.
So this is her speaking about their group.
I got a spot in the basement of St. Philip's Church in 1979. And we call ourselves the Harlem Artists Development League, especially for you. And it's abbreviated Hadley. We go under the name of Hadley Players. That is my maiden name, Gertrude Hadley. So that's the beginning of the Hadley Players. We've been operating since 1979. We've been doing from 3 to 4 plays per season, and we're doing quite well. We have won quite a few awards. It's more than rewarding. I believe in giving people praises and things while they're living, and I hope to always keep the memory of their greatness.
That is really cool.
I thought it was neat. And I also liked what she had to say at the end there about remembering people while they're still alive. Yeah.
It needs to happen more.
It does. We often do these really great in memoriam situations when people are dead, when we should have just told them they were great when they were alive. So Gertrude ended up writing 5 plays over her lifetime, all of which tackled big topics like racism and politics, education, and family stuff. She was known for being a pretty tough director.
I can imagine.
And, she ran this Hadley Players Theater, and it wasn't like she just did it like, it wasn't just her name on the door. She ran that shit.
Yeah.
And she helped shape and steer the careers of many talented young Black actors in New York. In 1991, Jeannette was honored as a living legend at the National Black Theater Festival. So she got honored while she was alive.
Nice.
In 98, she was awarded the Lionel Hampton Legacy Award. He was a pretty famous activist. She was inducted into the Arkansas Black Hall of Fame the following year, and in perhaps one of the most full circle moments of her life, she was awarded the Paul Robeson Award from the Actors Equity Association in 2002.
Very nice.
Well into her 80s, she continued to appear on stage and in films, and she ended up retiring from theater altogether at age 98.
Whoa.
Gertrude Hadley Jeannette died on April 4th, 2018.
Shit.
Not
too long ago.
At the age of 103.
Oh my gosh.
She was a rural farm girl from Arkansas who broke down racial and gender barriers in two drastically different worlds and gave up what could have been a lucrative acting career in Hollywood to lift up and preserve the culture of Black theater in Harlem.
There's that sacrifice for others.
The Hadley Players still exist in Harlem today. They provide an opportunity for theater artists to sharpen their crafts. They keep their prices affordable for the community so that new talent can be developed. And they even offer free entrance to family and friends of players who cannot afford to attend shows. This is the legacy of Gertrude Jeannette, not only opening doors for others, but keeping them open for years to come. I'll leave you with the words of Ward Nixon. He is currently their artistic director at the Hadley Players. He said this: Ms. Jeannette left on this earth the feeling of hope, that wherever you are in life and whatever you want to do, you can always rise up.
It's beautiful.
I liked her a lot.
I liked it too.
So I used some Wikipedia. I also used the New York Times obituary for her in 2018, as well as a really cool New York Times Magazine article called Gertrude Jeannette, Her Impediment Ensured Her Success by Elizabeth McCracken. Remember the surgeon I talked about? The pediatric brain surgeon?
Oh, yes. Yes.
I got a lot of my information for her from a site called The History Makers. And I used them again today for Gertrude, and I highly recommend it.
History Makers.
Thehistorymakers.org. I also used Playbill. They did an obituary about her as well. The Encyclopedia of Arkansas, Tellers Untold, and a video on YouTube from the New Heritage Theater group called A Good Life, Gertrude Jeannette.
Wonderful. I like that she lived such a nice, long life.
Very long. 103.
Yukiko lived till 94.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had some long-lasting ones, and they were like
Right?
born a year apart.
Yeah.
I always think it's so weird when we have that
That
common
kind of-
connection.
Yep.
Well,
Just women stepping outside of their bounds, right?
I don't even know how I stumbled upon Gertrude. I don't know what I was doing when I found her, because I had somebody completely different in mind.
I don't know how I found this. The name stuck, and I made a note, and I think I was on my Instagram Wonderland.
Speaking of Instagram, if you're not already following us, you should definitely do so. We share pictures of the women that we talk about each week, and they're really fun to look at. And we're also always open to sharing the artwork and articles and other kinds of things about great women that you find. So don't be shy about emailing us. I don't know her podcast at gmail.com. And you can follow us via social media if you just scroll down to the bottom of our episode notes as you're watching or listening to this, and you can click on those or type in our username and find us pretty easily.
We also want to thank our editor, Lucas McIntyre.
Thank you, Lucas.
And also
Jennifer Finch
from L7
for our lovely theme music. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Oh, thank you for dealing with us. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.